Hello, I'm Patricia. I've been reflecting recently on this book that's both sobering and future-oriented. It's entitled The Philippines Towards Resilient Cities and Communities, and it's by Felino Palafox Jr., an architect and urban planner. I've been reflecting on this book, especially in light of the noise, the frustration, and the confusion over the recent flood control controversies. For the record, this copy was given to me by the author, but this video is not sponsored. I simply want to share some of the passages that stood out to me. One of these passages is on page 24 of chapter 1. It's about integral ecology. It goes, "As species of the earth, we do not live alone. Being the only species that is capable of thinking and rational thought, the earth is our responsibility. I remember back in 2009, and this is Mr. Palafox speaking, of course, I was out of the country when Typhoon Ondoy flooded the streets of Manila. A reporter called me early in the morning and asked me to comment on certain politicians calling the tragedy an act of God. I said God gave us brains so that we could use it to understand, adapt, and innovate in solving problems. What happened was a sin of omission." Way back in 1975, the M-Metro plan submitted to the government already pointed out this potential calamity. From there, we recommended two flood control mitigation solutions, Mangahan Floodway and Parañaque Spillway. Only the floodway was built. No, the Ondoy calamity was an act of man. Two thoughts from this. My first thought is that I agree that our natural environment has a role to play in the larger scheme of things. I feel that if we don't understand that concept, then whatever program we craft will always end up disjointed, short-sighted, and ultimately unsustainable. My second thought is that back in 2023, I interviewed a Laguna Lake fisherman, and he said the exact same thing. He said that because there's no Parañaque flood spillway, there's no outlet to drain the water from Laguna Lake to Manila Bay. I remembered what he said because it was a first-hand perspective on the consequences of that unrealized plan. Talking more about that unrealized plan, let's move on to chapter 6. Specifically pages 102 to 103. Just FYI, I also have my notes here, so I might be looking to the right every now and then. In the 1970s, the Philippine government started to evaluate flood mitigation and disaster risk measures. This resulted in the Mangahan Floodway and Parañaque Spillway Complex proposal, which was further backed by the M-Metro Plan, an interagency project of the government in partnership with Freeman Fox and Associates of London and Hong Kong. This project included recommendations for transport, land use, and flood control. In this plan, Laguna Lake will serve as the initial floodwater container and Manila Bay as a secondary container. When Pasig River and Marikina River reach critical levels, the excess water is diverted to Laguna Lake through the Mangahan Floodway, while the Parañaque Spillway will flush out excess water from Laguna Lake towards Manila Bay to protect the 29 Laguna lakeshore towns. The two most important elements in this plan are the Mangahan Floodway and the Parañaque Spillway, which were supposed to be simultaneously constructed. However, only the floodway was built. Every time floodwaters are diverted into the Laguna Lake via the Mangahan Floodway, the lake becomes like a toilet without a flush. This was what happened during Typhoon Ondoy, in which 4,600 cubic meters per second of floodwaters came down from the mountains and flooded more than 80,000 hectares of low-lying urban land in Metro Manila and around Laguna Lake. In comparison, Singapore only has 71,000 hectares of land. I don't know what to say about this except, what was the holdup? Was it political will or lack thereof? Was it competing interests? I mean, I feel that the potential of the country is such a stark contrast to the lived realities of its citizens. Anyway, let me share this illustration from page 103. This is the Sierra Madre Mountains. This is the Marikina Valley portion of Laguna Lake. This would have been the Parañaque spillway that would have flushed excess water from Laguna Lake to Manila Bay. Chapter 6 also has a few disaster resilient tips for homeowners, so allow me to share these to you now. The first tip is to elevate electricity outlets, which is understandable. It also says that if you have a home with more than one floor, then create a separate circuit for each floor. This is to prevent lasting damage to your electrical system and prevent electric shocks in case of flash floods. The second tip is to invest in disaster mitigation technologies. This can be as practical as putting big drums under the gutter drain, or as integrated, such as covering a part of your roof with solar panels or investing in a green roof with rainwater harvesting. These are important because in the event of lack of water or electricity brought about by a disaster, at least you have an alternative source of energy to draw from. And lastly, because of the earthquakes that rocked Cebu, Davao, La Union, Zambales, and now even Surigao, I thought to include in this vlog a few portions about earthquakes, especially earthquakes in Metro Manila. Let's now move on to pages 110 and 111 from Chapter 7. In 2004, JICA, or the Japan International Cooperation Agency, conducted a study entitled the Metropolitan Manila Earthquake Impact Reduction Study. The numbers that I will mention in a few seconds are a simulation of what would happen during the first hour should a magnitude 7 earthquake occur in Metro Manila. According to the study, should that incident occur, around 170,000 residential houses would be heavily damaged or would collapse. 8 to 10% of hospitals, schools, fire stations, police stations, and government offices would likewise be heavily damaged or would collapse. 100 kilometers of telecommunications cables and 30 kilometers of electrical cables would snap. So there goes the internet. The death toll in the first hour could reach around 34,000 people. Another 20,000 could become casualties in the succeeding hours because of fire and successive tremors that would occur. That's food for thought, right? Note also that between 2010 to 2024, the National Capital Region's population grew from 11.86 million to over 14 million. So the numbers that are mentioned here should theoretically be larger now. Be that as it may, we're not completely helpless. Here's quoting from pages 113 to 129. Actually, I already kind of memorized this bit. At the individual level, we can help ourselves by knowing where the fault lines in our area are. We can also keep our eyes peeled on the latest developments in our place because this, of course, could affect the future of our neighborhood. In our homes, we should always know where our keys are, as well as the nearest exits. At the government level, public officials need to retrofit and repair major bridges and dams and dikes and schools and hospitals. City engineers should, moreover, inspect and audit old buildings, especially those that are crumbling and creaky. It is mentioned here that it's cheaper to prepare for disasters instead of reacting after the fact. There's more details that are listed here and detailed. However, I won't dwell on those anymore. If this video or this book made you pause to reflect on the murky politics of flood control, or the sometimes fragile ways we approach resilience in the Philippines, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching.